Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, fellow educators from the Global Association of Islamic Schools, a series called Scholar Series. MashaAllah, today we have a great scholar that will be here today to kind of give us some more information on his field. But MashaAllah, we are now representing more than 20 different countries. So educators from all over the world. We're really excited for our next episode. And today I have my partner with me, Imran Nanawala. How you doing, Imran?
I'm doing great, Habib. How are you?
Good, good, good. Thank you so much for getting the flyer out, the marketing out, making sure the whole video setup is there. So inshallah ta'ala, I want to maybe ask you maybe to kind of jump into this interview later with if you have any questions that you see. But for us, mashallah, we're just going to take 30 to 40 minutes here, but we want to make sure it is nice and concise, and at the same time, there's something we can take home some information with, and then hopefully benefit our students. But before we do that, I want to kind of get a better understanding of who we have as our guest today for the
Sure.
Scholar Series. So, Imran, can you kind of give us a background of our guest today?
Yeah, we have an amazing episode set for today, and we have Dr. Aasim Padela, who is an internationally recognized thought and research leader, as well as a widely sought after lecturer in the field of Muslim community health research, intervention design, and Islamic bioethics. Using Muslim Americans in Islam as the motto, he studies how religion, one, impacts patient health behaviors and healthcare experiences, two, informs the professional identities and workplace experience of clinicians, and three, furnishes bioethical guidance to patients, providers, policymakers, and religious leaders. He has authored over 140 peer-reviewed articles, book chapters, and is an editor, co-editor of 4 books. He also serves in an editorial capacity for the Encyclopedia of Islamic Bioethics, American Journal of Bioethics, BMC Medical Ethics, International Journal of Islam, BETIM Journal of Medical Humanities, and Tahfim Journal of Islam and the Contemporary World. So quite a bit, and I know based on this, the topic that we're going to discuss today, some very, very unique questions about the youth, about bioethics, about revelation and certainty in faith. So very excited.
Yeah, mashallah. So we're excited to have Dr. Padela on. So let's go ahead and kind of bring him in. Now, I know Dr. Padela, may Allah bless you, and I really appreciate it because I know you are on call. And as an ER doc, I know at nights it's not easy. So I know you just finished your shift, you haven't even gotten home, got into an office, and he's ready right now to go ahead and talk to us. So Jazakallah khair, Dr. Padela, for taking your time.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi sahbihi wa wala. No, it's really a pleasure to be with you all this morning, inshallah, on this beautiful summer morning. It was, as you all know, for those who are listening, or those who are not listening, if you don't know, it's a holiday weekend in the United States, which means that the ERs were very, very busy. Alhamdulillah, we'll try to make two, but it's really a pleasure to be with you guys this morning.
Alhamdulillah. Hey, so we want to, I know you're tired, so we're going to make this short, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we get all the little information that we can from you. So I'm gonna go straight right in. You look at your bio, mashallah, there's a lot of research and work you've done. So why, bioscience in Islam? What got you, into this field and this research?
Yeah, and alhamdulillah, I think that there's three things I would say on that level. I mean, as you just heard, for those who are listening, I'm a physician, right? And so whenever we think about our professional life, we also have to think about how our tradition kind of helps us think about that professional life, right? So what are the character, as you heard, assignment? So what are the character traits? So what are the ethical values we should bring forth in our profession? So at that practical level, whether you're a accountant or whether you're a physician, we should think about how Islam informs that professional sort of character, that professional values, and actually the practice of that field as well. So that's just one, a personal level. So for me, it's always been trying to merge an Islamic identity that we have with kind of the professional identity that we are taught. And I'm saying taught specifically because we are, right? All of us are taught how to be professionals or what our fields are about. And we have to take a critical lens to that approach, right? Whether we learn in a Islamic school environment or whether we learn in a non-Islamic school environment. We have to think about how Islam informs the way we are in our profession. So that's one. And for me, that's always been a quest, always trying to merge those things, as you know, Habib. But I've had some Islamic sort of background and training, and so that allowed me to think about more deeply what that means. Two, and I think this is maybe more important for the audience here. Everything that we consume in society, everything in the popular culture, I think has to do a little bit with, and maybe I'm biased, but with sort of the biological notions of the human being.
Mm.
So almost everything, right? So if you look at any popular media narrative today, we talk about sort of aliens, right? Then that has something to do with what is human beings, right? Or we're talking about whether we can live forever. Well, that has something about the biology of science and how we think about extension of life or the radical extension of life. When we think about can we can we build cyborgs that are sentient, right? Can AI be sentient? It has to do with sort of this notion of, okay, what is a human being? Can we move our minds into some other body? So everything, and that's just bias, right? But when I look at any popular culture narrative and story today, it has to do something with bioscience, and then it forces us to think about, well, what does Islam say about us as human beings? So that's the second relationship, and I said there's three. The third is that being a parent of children who've gone to Islamic schools and the wonderful schools that you run, Habib, and some of my kids run your schools, but others as well. I find that our youth, particularly, don't have some skill sets to engage in the world with that critical lens. And for me, it has been a process of moving upstream. So in dealing with, community members to then medical students to now even further upstream, early in education, with Islamic high school and college students who sometimes don't have this, or we're all struggling for it, but they don't have this sort of critical lens to think about what they're actually imbibing in society and how Islam informs that. Simply, and I don't want to take too much time, how do we look at the world from an Islamic lens, right? That question is a big question. And sometimes they just don't have this sense. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm praying and I'm going to do salah and so on and so forth. But no. The whole point of the tradition is to make you look at everything in the world with a certain lens. What's that lens? And they can answer that. And that's disturbing because our society will force them to think about from different lens if we don't prepare them with our lens, right?
SubhanAllah. I think what you're bringing up is really important because kids, we want our kids to learn to know Allah better, and I think this is great. And then so now when you've done this and you kind of brought this up about students, right, high school students, and some, maybe when you're dealing with sometimes medical students, so why now, like this, you've been, our topic today is the importance of teaching bioscience and Islam. Um, why high school students right now? Why do you think? Why is it so important to now start dealing with some of these and having these discourse at a high school level?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I mean, I think there's several ways to answer that as well. But the first simple thing is that at least for many of our kids, they idolize this notion of being a physician, right? And that's put into them very early. It's not in college. It's really early, very early. So you got to be a doctor, and being a doctor is like being a great Muslim. I mean, that's what they think, right? That's what they're told by their parents and then by society. And so that's part of their notion of what field I'm going to go into, what area I'm going to go into occurs early. Yes, we change our minds perhaps in college, but it occurs very early, particularly in secondary school. So that's one thing. Sociologically, we have pressures, whether good or bad, to be involved in the medical fields, and they're always starting off with that. They might move somewhere else, but they always start off with that. So I think that is one area we can say, okay, well, this is what you think you might want to get into. Let's talk about that field, and let's talk about how the bioscientific lens, right, influences how we think about things. So simple thing is when you go into medicine, you're thinking about the body as a biological machine in a sense, right? There might be some other parts to it, but we don't know what those parts are, and our science can't tell us really what those parts are. So let's just deal with the body as a biological machine, and we reduce this sort of mystery of humanity to the functionings of some chromosomes and how they express proteins. There's a reductionist view that just becomes part of the part of the area that we're going into. And as I said, Muslim high school students don't necessarily understand that. They just get indoctrinated in doctoring when they move forward. Secondarily, I said to you this idea that why high school students, you asked me why high school students, the issue is that they are going to unwittingly, I think, at that age, take on stances from society that are occurring. So, we teach in high school, but they spend a lot of time outside of high school. And what they spend their time outside of high school, they're going to learn about the human being in certain ways that they won't even recognize that they're learning about it in that way. And popular media narratives are simply about that, I think. Right? So there's a certain notion of what the human being is that they pick up by watching movies or reading articles. And we don't, that's not, you're not teaching on that, right? But they are, at that time, they're forming this notion that will inform their entire life view later on. And I think it's important at that stage to give them some tools by which they engage with that. Thirdly, to me, it's about this amazing thing. We talk about it, you talk about it, and I've heard you speak about it, that look, the Quran are ayat, right? They're signs of Allah's existence. And science is also signs of Allah's existence. Look at the beauty of the human being and the body and the functioning and the society. Look at the beauty of how you can hear bird song. Look, all this beautiful stuff that Allah's created. So you're trying to get them to see, right? That there's signs in the natural world indicating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But do we do that in our scientific classes in high school? When you're prepping them for AP biology tests, are you actually saying, okay, no, this is a sign to indicate Allah's existence? I would wager that many of us aren't doing that. Yet we're in an Islamic school. And you're talking about the Quran as an ayat, and you say that the other stuff is also an ayat, a sign towards Allah, but you're not doing that. So that connectivity, I think, is extremely important. If we're saying it with our lips and we're not doing it in our practice of teaching, that's a problem. We're creating that psychological division, whether we know it or not. And so we must infuse our curricula with this lens. No, this is actually indicating Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's existence. There are proofs for existence through this. Rational mind, you use it, yes, you can get to the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I want to be involved with that in a little space because I think that will help form their stable identity in the future when they are challenged in college with all these ideas that are coming from other places. But it starts early on, prepping them in that stage in high school, I think. You would know better, but that's how I hypothesize that's the stage at which they will form their stable identities.
Dr. Padela, could you deep dive a little bit more in terms of the framework, the godly or the God-centered framework that's used in the curriculum? You gave some great examples right now in terms of how to instill these values and counter, what they're facing in the world. And then can you also connect this question to the Templeton grant? Want to just kind of bring in the Templeton grant, see how that's helped?
Sure. So the project that we're talking about, and we haven't been very clear about what that project was. So that project involved developing a curriculum between Islam and bioscience, right? And it was a curriculum that was co-developed with scholars, right? Islamic scholars and scientists, Muslim scientists. And it's at the intersection of that, Islam and bioscience. So we co-created a curriculum that focused on 5 questions about the human being. Right. So what is the human being? What are his capacities? What's his future? Is it unique? Right. And sort of how changeable and malleable is the human being? Right. So those are the 5 questions. These are questions that underlie everything. It's the fundamental questions about the human, right? It's just like sort of the human condition. What is it? So these are big questions, right? In Templetonian words, big questions. And we want to bring Islam and we want to bring science together on those questions. And the framework to evaluate that, as you're asking, was, okay, well, we want to understand what is the narrative within science. Okay, so what is the human being? The human being is a biological machine. I mentioned this, right? It's just a machine with certain parts, and its functioning is through its biological mechanisms, whether that be, physiological or psychological aspects of the human. They all can be explained by biological functioning. What's his future? Well, his future is that it's going to go and decompose and be, go into the ground or wherever you bury it, and that's that. Those are the ways in which narratives, right? How did it come about? Well, we have an evolutionary account of the human being that is propagated throughout the profession of medicine, really. So those are the ways in which scientific narratives generate those answers. And then we say, well, what does Islamic narrative say? What does the Quran and Hadith say? But the framework is evaluate both of those narratives through understanding the certainty around those narratives. So when science says to you, hey, we know about evolution is kind of the straw man sometimes, but it's also the classical example. If science says human beings evolved, what does that really mean first? where they come from, what's the evidence for that, right? Is it archaeological evidence? Is it fossil evidence? Is it what is it? Do we see it today? What's that evidence? And let's understand it through science. Well, what will science say? How definitive are you? Then if you say the hadith says this, okay, hadith, there's this entire science of hadith interrogation, right? And what grading is that hadith? And then when you're thinking, what is actually the words being said? So you bring these two accounts together, evaluate them in terms of certainty of those fields themselves, what science would say, what the hadith sciences would say. And then you say, okay, well, what do we know? That was the idea. So for high school students, we weren't focused on resolving the question. It was being critically appraising, right, the evidence for the question from within those fields, to understand that not everything is certain, and it's not necessarily conflict. Okay, there could be, but there isn't a necessity of conflict between religion and science. But you must think critically. And you must think critically about what's going to come in the future as well. When you find scientific evidence says, "Oh, tomorrow there are aliens that exist on, Alpha Centauri." Okay, what is the basis for that? What's the logical flow from the scientific lens for that claim? And then how do we think about it? Does the Quran say that there might be other beings out there? Does the Hadith say that, or did some Islamic scholars hypothesize about that? And so we would kind of have this sort of critical appraisal of evidences. That was it. Now, for other age groups, right? So we also, this project, we did it with Islamic high school students as an evaluation here. We then developed the curriculum and redeveloped the curriculum for Muslim pre-medical students in the college at the Islamic University of Malaysia. And we also did the same, but we expect to be a little bit more in-depth engagement with the material at hand, right? And if you do it in different environments, you would say, okay, well, Muslim medical students should be able to handle it even further in depth, or scholars, they should be able to answer the questions, right? Mm-hmm. So in any case, you might move further down into interrogation at each level of what the students are prepared for. Does that help?
Absolutely.
So I think so. Just to get so first of all, this is like open source information that hopefully the idea is to first you got the researchers together, and then so when you got the scholars weren't just from America, but you got scholars like from Turkey, from Malaysia, from the Gulf, I think Europe, and then you got everyone together. But then you also got scientists from several different countries too, to kind of come together, right? And then Dr. Padela, and then after getting this information, so it looks like you were doing a pilot with high school students. I know that this part it was in Chicago, and then you had another 100, 200 in Malaysia. Now, so when getting this information, then the whole idea was to kind of, is the idea just as an open information, or then I think you decided to work with educators to kind of disseminate, to have it packaged in a way where it's easy to disseminate for teachers and stuff, or Dr.
Yeah. So the project, thank you for reminding me of that. So it had three sort of phases, right? So designing the curriculum, implementing it, testing it. Then after that, actually 4 phases, and there's dissemination. So as you said, so we designed it, right, collaboratively, as I mentioned, with Islamic scholars and scientists coming together on these questions. So you put a team together. We had many collaborators, so people from Chicagoland, Darul Qasim. We had people from Basira Education, Sheikh Hamza Karam Ali. We had Shoaib Malik, who's a scientist from Abu Dhabi. So we had an international team, each with some lens of teaching of the scientific topic, potentially, right, as well as some Islamic literacy, right? So we don't want to bring people in who didn't have at least some ability to converse amongst each other. And that dyad of a scholar and a scientist had to then map out the lesson plan for that teaching, right? So you look at, okay, well, we want to teach about transhumanism, or we want to teach about evolution. Okay, what is the scientific claim? What's the religious narratives? Let's bring it together. They would design that. And we brought people together who would be able to have some conversation, and the entire team together would have further conversations. You'd kind of mock up something, then we'd look at it together, and then we'd all have different ways in which we think we can improve it. And we had pedagogical experts such as yourself and others come together and look at how we're teaching make it the right tailored stage of the learner as well. So that was the design. Then the implementation, as you mentioned, 2 implementations. So I'm a scientist in that sense, a researcher. So we created survey measures by which we would assess how students gain knowledge, right? Do their attitudes towards religion and science conflict change, right? Were they better prepared are more interested in pursuing this intersection between Islam and bioscience in their careers, whether through studying or through investigation. So that was a behavioral change, sort of a knowledge change model. That was the testing. The first testing of pilot was with Islamic high school students drawn from Chicagoland, across 5 schools, right, in the Chicago area, one actually in Milwaukee, and they came together over 2 weekends to do this. So each question was addressed through a seminar, which is about an hour and a half. Then we had an add-on initial seminar about the framework, the epistemological framework, and a review session. So in total, 7 seminars, right, over 2 weekends in Chicagoland, and then we piloted it there. We assessed it, how it worked, what didn't work. Our people like you and other expert educators kind of viewed and said, hey, you could do this better, or you could change this because it didn't quite hit the audience correctly, or they didn't understand this because, look, your surveys tell you they didn't understand this. Then we improved it and went to then Malaysia with initially 209 people signed up, and I think at the end about 180 students who had just finished their the first 2 years of foundation studies. So then they were going to enter medical school after that point. So about a couple of years, maybe older than those in the States. We did a pilot over there in an intensive style. So no 2 weekends. This was 4 days consecutively. And it was amazing in many ways. Alhamdulillah, we did that. Then we got the data, same thing. So that's the design, implementation, right? Testing. So we saw what worked, what didn't work. And we got surveys back from both the students, but also the teachers themselves evaluate themselves. And then after all that, we said, okay, let's now write it up for others that you're mentioning to implement. And the way they would do that was that we invested some time with expert educators to create teaching modules. So we had videos from our teaching that people could use. We had lesson plans that they can use and adapt. We have scripts that certain people from your team, HQEC team, put together scripts for teachers and other materials that they can use, all as open source teaching modules on our website. People can download and utilize them. There's actually attached to that some teaching professional learning community and workshops that our partners, Islamic School Leagues of America, is doing presently. And we're going to have those online. People download these, they can attend these sort of workshops, and then they can have a supported community learning community after, if they're going to implement it in their schools. And then we're going to have a couple of, inshallah ta'ala, in-person sort of symposia workshops for people to come together and then imbibe the material, so to speak, and learn about the topics and more in depth in a live session, perhaps over a weekend. And we're still figuring that out. So yes, the idea is for us to have shown you that we've developed the research, tested, developed curriculum through the lens of Islam and bioscience with people who are expert. But in the sense that it wasn't, we were all learning together as well. And then now we want you all, Islamic schools here and others, to implement that, test it out, and be supported in some way with individuals who deployed it already. So that's the idea. So it is, in that word, open source, ready for people to kind of utilize.
And Dr. Aasim, to go back to the one of the previous questions, could you just the Templeton grant, like what role did the grant have in supplementing some of this work? And could you just give us an explanation of what the Templeton organization is?
So the John Templeton Foundation has been alhamdulillah, is an amazing organization. I've been funded from them for many years, and they funded the entire project, right? In the sense that we put a proposal together. I think we started thinking about it in 2019, and we put proposals together in 2020, and then they reviewed it, and so it took time to get the funding and so on and so forth. But their focus is, there's many different domains of interest, but one of them is related to the notion of, broadly speaking, for this audience, I'll say integrating theological and scientific knowledge, right, in a simple way. So their view, which aligns with kind of, in some ways, I agree with this, others agree with this, but this notion that we can integrate knowledges from these two domains, and they're interested. So that's one. So we applied to this idea of, okay, we're going to integrate and understandings from religious texts, right, and sources, scriptural texts about these fundamental questions about the human being, and also scientific. We're not going to ignore it, right? And then the other focus of theirs has been to try to think about how we can teach better, right? To have students become more epistemically humble is their term, humble dialogue, where people come in and say, I don't have all the answers, but we're going to try to figure out things together. We're going to use kind of a methodology or framework or epistemological framework to understand things, right? So the idea is humble dialogue. Come and have humility and form good characters, because we can't have true conversation society if we think we all know the answers before we engage in dialogue. That's what I meant. The scientists and ourselves, we were thinking, okay, what is it? Actually, let's think about it together before we teach, because we don't have all the answers, and we want to make sure that we understand the question, but also the evidence fully before we kind of teach. So that's another learning thing for them. And then they hope that if you have humble dialogue when you teach, you also teach students to have better character traits, right? To have wisdom and to be to be humble, and so on and so forth. So that those dimensions of our project kind of aligned with their views, and that foundation has been. I mean, people say that the foundation is a Christian origin. Certainly, it's true that they've funded and they've thought a lot about things through a Christian lens, but they're open to other faith groups. And alhamdulillah, like I said, for us, I've been involved with them in the sense of as a grantee for many years. So we were blessed that the entire project, meaning our time, our convenings, the funding to kind of create the teaching modules, all of that was through them. And without their assistance or actually support, none of this would have happened, to be truthful.
Awesome.
So now, when you've been working with the students at a high school level to even some medical students, right? So when you looked at some of the topics, I got to, see, you had like evolution, free will, right? Extraterrestrial life, these questions that, when you interacted with the students, what were some things that you noticed that's very important for us as educators now, working with students day to day, and educating them, especially some of our science teachers, with the religious teachers? What would be some things that you want us to just be aware of? Again, I know your research is going to be open source for everyone to have, inshallah, in the next few months. But what were some like take-home moments or aha moments, or something that you could say nasiha to us educators?
Yeah.
Keep in mind.
So our hypothesis going into this that students, obviously, they go to different Islamic schools or colleges, and they have various different backgrounds. And so some of the interesting things, I think our interaction with the students was illuminating for us as well, right? So all of us came from different backgrounds in terms of teaching. Most of us in the college or graduate school level, not at the high school level. And what was illuminating are a few things. So I remember that students let's talk about the Malaysian for a second, then I'll talk about the United States. So in the Malaysian course, they were much more, what's the word? They had a much more sense of integration already, because we're at an Islamic university in Malaysia, and they thought, oh yeah, religion and science, they don't have any conflict, right? And so for them, it was interesting to say, well, look, this is the narrative from science. Here's a narrative from religion. Is there a conflict? There was they hadn't thought of. They had assumed integration. They had assumed, obviously, a Tawhidic worldview, but they hadn't been forced to actually truly think about that, in a sense, which was interesting for us, because you would assume that if you think of maturation of knowledge, it's okay, I see conflict, then I bring it together. So you would think that comes at the end, right? After you've seen all the stuff, not a priori. But it was a priori embedded within them. Oh, everything's together. And they hadn't been forced to think, well, okay, tell us then, how do you resolve this issue? Or how do you think about this, right? So so that was one. And so I think for educators thinking about, well, do we actually open the box and then have them form a more stable identity? Is that better? Or is it just say, no, everything is fine, don't think about these challenges a priori, right? Don't think about them really in depth. The thing in the United States was interesting was we asked them, one of the exercises in my particular seminar I was teaching about human futures was the question I had, and it was about, we were talking about transhumanism and whether we should change the body, right? And science does that. I mean, medicine does that, right? People think we can become cyborgs, and should medicine be doing that kind of thing? What was interesting is when we asked them to look at these popular narratives that were in media clips, and like we used, and you told me I'm dated, but ideas about people mind uploading, right? So this is in many movies here, or the idea that you can kind of become a cyborg. Many movies here. I'm not going to name them. I'm not giving any marketing material for Marvel, whatever else it is. But nonetheless, a lot of these movies have these things. So we saw some clips and we asked them, make this more Islamic. It was really interesting, surprising for me that the way they would make it Islamic would be, okay, let's put a hijab on the woman, right? or let's make sure, like, it would be this very superficial narrative change. Oh, we're going to become cyborgs, do jihad, and that wasn't the point. The point wasn't that we're dealing with the notion of the human being. It's not that you become a hijab, now you're Islamic, or okay, you're gonna fight jihad, that's why it's okay to become a cyborg. It was the idea of becoming a cyborg. It has something antithetical to the Islamic tradition. And that's actually a real key point for you educators here, because they, as I said, they're imbibing understandings in everything they're consuming in social media and popular media, in the books they read, in the fiction novels, everything. Unless we equip them on some notion, let's think about what they're actually saying, let's understand that narrative, then they're just going to believe that first and then say, well, why does Islam have a problem with it? Right? What's the purpose of life? Oh, the purpose, they won't see the problem, and they've already imbibed the understanding from external sources. So in Malaysia, that wasn't as much of a problem because Malaysian media, right, has some integration within it already, right? And the things that they consume, yes, they come from the United States, but there's another whole system of what they're imbibing. Here, they're not. So that's one thing, right? And I'm being very, very honest that it's really present everywhere. There's a narrative of what the human being is and what it should be that affects everything, that we just let it go, right? And we deal with these. And I'll say, learning from our Christian colleagues, right? Christians have had a few issues that they're very worried about. I'll tell you, right? You know this, abortion, this and that, those hot button topics. But in the rest of it, they've kind of let it be. And are we going to follow the same model? Oh, we have just hot button topics, a few critical issues, everything else that the environment is fine? Or no, we actually have a vision for humanity and for society. Maybe we don't know fully what it is, but we know what we're imbibing is in it. Okay, and so that's one. Or in this sense, the other interesting thing for me was that they were very hungry for this sort of stuff, right? That having a view of, let me take, and I think we should think about this really. Like, if you say, I want to read a science novel and then have a class, let's think about what that meant for you. Let's think about how you think, what were they were saying. Like, do we have these open spaces of conversation in our Islamic schools or not? Where we just talk about popular media, or we're talking about what I heard here? I mean, is there this sort of current events through an Islamic lens? I don't, but there's got to be some space for them to converse freely, and not just in a curricular, here, learn this, here's a lesson plan, take this test, but some way to have conversation around these things that they're thinking about. And I don't know if it exists. I think it should exist. It should exist for people who are willing to engage with their ideas as they are, and then say, let's kind of be on this journey of understanding what Islam calls upon us to do or not. And let's bring people in who will tell us something about what Islam says. I think those open spaces are critical, both in the Muslim world and non-Muslim world. So they're very hungry for that. I mean, because they would spend time after the seminar. Let's talk. Let me get, and we were just there for a little time period. Does that help?
Yeah, no, appreciate it, Zach. Okay. Imran, do you have a question? I know we're slowly gonna.
Sure.
Couple minutes.
Yeah, very fascinating, Dr. Aasim, because Habib brought this project up that he was working on this a couple of years ago, and some of the first things that I was thinking about was, as you mentioned, elongating life to make these like intergalactic journeys to potential planets with life, the transfer of consciousness, installing various mechanical or technological parts in the body to enhance the body. But my question revolves around, if you were to gauge the Western, just keeping it in the Western context, where do you see generally society heading in? What direction are we heading in when it comes to, for example, elongating life, using technology, and what do you see the broader impact will be on society?
So this as is a professional concern for me as a physician, and I teach medical students who are non-Muslim as well. We have classes on these questions. Actually, let me say that in the medical school that I'm at presently, I created an elective course. We have 40 students signed up around bioscience, philosophy, theology, and notions of the human being. That's the general term. It's the same sort of thing here. With medical students who are from all backgrounds, and we're having dialogues around these critical questions, because, believe it or not, even in medical school, and I've been at several, right? I've been in faculty on several. We actually don't talk about the human being. We treat patients and we understand diseases, but we don't talk about what the human being is and what his future is. It's a sad state, right? That we are we're treating diseases and we're thinking about this entity, but we don't actually bring it up. Okay, what do you think the human being is? Okay, so back to your question, I am very concerned that the narrative of what the human being is informing the way we think about medicine. So there already are places. I mean, we can talk about uh, you know the goal of people like Elon Musk and Neuralink. What is that goal, right? There are people who there. If you look and Google it, there are people who already have tried to take parts of their body and make it mechanical, create relationships where you can take some aspects of the brain and control other things, right? And the idea is, okay, maybe we can do mind uploading. I'm concerned that the profession of medicine, because the profession of medicine is thought about, we need to maximize life, right, in whatever way, that perhaps these ideas of transhumanism are an radical extension of life are already embedded within it. We have a whole centers that do anti-aging science, right? Take hormones, do this and do that to live longer. We already have people outside of the normal spaces, for example, that will do adaptations to your body. People can get implants. There's already a biohacking culture, right? It was very prominent in the COVID times, right? That already exists in society, which is trying to be put into the medicine so you can help people do that. And so I do think that these notions of all we're about is this life, all about we're about is trying to prolong this life, and all we're about is creating technologies that help us kind of extend this idea to make ourselves stronger and better, right, for various purposes. That will happen, right? I believe medicine will have to be part of that because we have the scientific and practical knowledge to adapt the body, to replace, to do genetic engineering, right, so that people can then breathe toxic fumes in society. Oh, we'll just change the genes so they can now deal with oxygen levels at only 14%, right? Or we can do X, Y, Z. So that is a concern. And I do think that unwittingly, in some ways, medicine is imbibing this cultural narrative, because what we do is informed by this, what society wants us to do, right? Those expectations fuel what becomes in the house of medicine. So a counter to that, there are, believe it or not, Christian medical schools in the United States that talk about, no, our goal is redemption of the human being, right? So, or from a Christian narrative of redemption of what Christ the healer did, and so on and so forth. Muslims, unfortunately, don't have this sort of as robust notion of what the limits are of medicine. We have Catholic hospitals that say Catholic healthcare directives, what the Pope says. And again, I ask you, though we have huge amounts of Muslims as physicians in the United States and in the West, where are they creating their narratives about what we should do and shouldn't do in medicine? Yeah. Even at Islamic medical universities, it's kind of this, oh, here's the fiqh of X, Y, that's it. But not the philosophical notion or theological notion, what's healing, how are we healers, what are we doing actually with society? And that is concerning. This project didn't answer that fully, but hopefully it equips them with some lens to think about that. So does that answer your question? Like, I am worried, and it is happening. I mean, it is absolutely happening presently. When you read about ectogenesis, so we're going to have children born ex body, ex utero, right, in machines that can incubate. I mean, look at how many post-apocalyptic narratives in movies that occurs in. And we have that, right? We have that today. People want that technology. I don't want to have a child and be 9 months pregnant. Let's just do it outside the body. What does that mean for humanity, right? We already have marijuana, right? Okay, now look at the Brave New World. I'm dating myself, right? Brave New World and Soma make people feel better about them, right? Selves. And so, okay, let's already have openness about marijuana. And marijuana doesn't have medical risk. Actually, the reality is it does. But we in society are already okay with it. So the Pandora's box is already open. How are we going to go back? We're not going to go back. Those things, and medicine, physicians are part of that. Health research is part of that. So anyway.
Yeah, but Dr. Padela, I really kind of appreciate it. For many of you out there, educators, may Allah bless, and he's a very humble individual, but because I realize in his bio he didn't add, but one of the things is he also has studied some traditional learning. So when you bring both things together, you kind of have that foresight of, inshallah, of making sure our kids are educated, but not just for this world, but also for the hereafter. And how do we balance what we are trying to do? And Islamic schools, that's our whole idea, right? How do we keep teach the deen in the proper way, that has them to have a better understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then also benefiting our society. But I know we could keep on asking many questions, but we always trying to keep it a limited so it's easy to digest. But Dr. Padela, is there a website for them to get more information about this new work that's going to be open source for everyone to have? Or it's just not just for teachers, but ulama, or weekend youth groups who could just take these resources, take it by subject by subject. Is there a website that they could go to get all this information, sir?
Sure. So the general website is medicineandislam.org. That's for the Initiative on Islamic Medicine, which is our nonprofit organization that helped convene this work. And then if you go to research projects, you'll find one on the project we're talking about here, which is called Fostering Connections Between Bioscience and Islam. And then go on that page, you'll see the links, you'll see the videos, you'll see all that stuff there. You can sign up to be part of these workshops and learning communities as well. So it's a secondary link from that site. The overall site simply would be medicineandislam.org, and you'll find stuff there, inshallah, for benefit. May Allah bless all of you who are in the trenches, helping our students learn and equipping them with the deen and helping them understand what the dunya is for. And may Allah bless all those who put this together. I was just a convener and a bridge builder in a sense, but alhamdulillah, the content was through our scholars, our ulama, and our teachers, and they're the ones who actually did a lot of the hard work and hard.
Yeah, man. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you for your foresight and your vision, and many other things, and also bioethics, Islamic bioethics. So all you future doctors, or doctors, there's a lot of research that Dr. Padela has done. So Allah accept it. May Allah protect you and your family, and put barakah in all your work in the future. And we ask that you keep us in your du'as too. Imran, thank you again, brother, for always setting things up and being a part of this. And to all you educators all throughout the world, keep doing what you're doing. Inshallah, we will get the Jannah money for it with these kids. Inshallah, Allah give us the best in this world and the best in the hereafter. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.